Hi there, welcome to this build of a 45-inch wingspan Quiver. Now the Quiver is a 2/3 scale version of the Flying Quaker, a lovely vintage model from the late 1930s. And so far in this build we've got the two fuselage sides completed. We did this in the last video. And what we're going to be doing in this video is pulling these sides together and getting the basic fuselage built or together. And this is really exciting because it's when the model really starts to take shape and actually changes from two-dimensional to three-dimensional, and I'm really looking forward to doing this. But we need to make sure we get it right so we've got a nice straight and true fuselage. We don't want to end up something that's banana shaped. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to build or make the cross formers. And if we have a look at the plans, we can see them here. But as I always say, don't trust the plans. I mean, they're a great reference guide, gives us an indication of what we need to be making, but the measurements for these three formers we need to take from the fuselage side, or more importantly from our fuselage that we've actually made, because we want to get these so they fit. We don't want to make them the size there and find out they don't fit, which in actual fact they won't fit very well if we use these templates. So we need to measure the fuselage itself, the sides that we've built, and also the plan view of the fuselage here. We need to take those measurements. And it's important to note that F3 and F4 need to be exactly the same width, because this section of the fuselage here is parallel sided, and that's going to be the first thing that we glue together to get that parallel sided section done. And then we can draw in the tail, and we can also put in F2 here, which draws in the nose a little bit. And there's quite a disparity between the width of F2 there and the width on the plan. So let's stick to the side elevation and the plan here and just use those as a rough kind of reference of the shape that they need to be. So I will start to make those cross formers, and we'll have a look when we've done. Right, well, I've got these three cross formers done, and I've just got this mocked up. It's not glued. I just wanted to see what it looked like. And I've got some little fillets or little triangular pieces made to help strengthen the back when we eventually come to pull that in. Now, this former here, the firewall F2, needs the fuselage sides pulling in so it actually fits properly. But you get the idea. And you'll have seen earlier I had this infill here to strengthen this nose area. Well, I've also made these pieces as well, which I'm going to glue in before I pull the fuselage sides together. And that will not only add a little bit more strength, but within the engine bay here you're going to get a lot of fuel and oil swilling around, getting blown around. And if these side pieces aren't in, then the fuel will be going straight on the inside of the covering. It could seep down between the covering and the balsa, even if we fuel proof it. So I think it'll just make a stronger, a sealed, better kind of engine compartment. I've got this former which will go on here once these sides are pulled in, and that needs to be in line with the angled front of the fuselage. This will probably get mostly cut out eventually once we've got this area built up, because we need to incorporate this mills and the needle valve. But better we get it in now, get it built up, and then we can cut, file, sand this area as needed. Now, the other thing that we need to consider before we glue this together is the engine mounts. And there's slots for the engine mounts, and if I take out these formers, we can see I've marked on the slots for the engine mounts, and these aren't central. They're actually offset because there is a 2.5 degree right thrust built into this. So I've drawn where they were, the holes need to be for the engine bearers as shown on the plans, but then I've moved them or widened them because the Mills engine has a slightly wider engine, the 1.3, than the 0.75 specified on the plans. So the next job I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out these slightly wider slots with this right thrust built in, and then I think we're ready to set this up and get it glued. And I think we're going to be gluing it on the flat top of the wing. It's about the only flat bit that is on this fuselage, so I think we'll set it up upside down and glue it together. But anyway, I will get these holes cut out for the engine bearers and get these engine bearers cut to length. I'm just using these are 1/4 by 3/8 beach bearers. Now before I set this out ready to glue, I thought it would be worth just saying something about these engine bearers, which I've now got in. I mean, they're just pushed in, obviously they need trimming and that, but I've cut the holes for the engine bearers, and as I said, I've done them an extra 2mm wider, so they're 26mm wide instead of 24 for the engine. And when we put those in, I was really careful to measure them accurately off the plans. You can see that there's quite a down thrust in those if you take this as the centre line, which I'm not convinced it is. I'm not sure where the centre line is on this aircraft, but I've measured the plans and the bearer is 21mm down from this spar here, or this this strut. So that's right, and this is 19mm down. So it's as shown on the plans. It just looks a little bit strange because it is such a steep down thrust, but I'm building it as per the plans, so hopefully that will be right. If we have a look in the nose here, we've got the engine bearers now that are spaced for the engine, and as I said, the back of the Mills comes back quite a decent way here, but there is room to fit it in, and we will shape a cowl around this. What I'm going to need to do though, to be able to pull the nose of this in properly, because it's not all the way in at the moment, is I'm going to have to just shave a little bit off, probably just 1mm off either side of these engine bearers at the front here, so that they fit snug against the cheeks, but also it allows the cheeks to come in, because the cheeks do need to come in about another, well, looking at that, because that's the right size, they need to come in about another 4mm, something like that. But that's easily achievable with this Mills engine. So it will be a tight fit, always knew that, but we can do it. So now I've got the engine bearers in, I will set this up and we'll get this glued together. Oh, and one last thing I want to say. This former here, I think I'm just going to cut that down a little bit in the middle, but leave the sides high. Don't want to take too much out that I weaken it, but when this fuselage is finished, it's going to have a little bit of top on there, like that. And I want to be able to get this battery in nice and comfortably. Probably going to have to use some big forceps I've got, but I want to get it in between those engine bearers like that on some foam, so that the weight for this battery is really as far forward as we can get it without putting it in the engine bay, of course. So I'll probably just lower this by about 1/4 of an inch, something like that, in the middle, just to make it easier to get that battery in. Right, well, I've now got this set up ready to be glued, and what I've done is I've set up the fuselage sides in line with the lines on my cutting mat, and I've put a piece of masking tape here, and I've drawn on the sides of the fuselage and the centre line that runs down the centre of it. Brilliant having these lines on the cutting mat, because it allows me to do that quite easily. So we now know that when we pull these tails in, they have to be in line with that centre line, and we can always use my set square like that just to pull them in equally. There we go. Now The crossformers, I've just got the two to glue up this parallel section, and I've checked with my square that these are at 90 degrees to the sides, so this is all square and lovely. And yep, there we go. And I've got some clamps just holding the formers exactly where I want them. I've also used my set square just to check that the sides are square to the table. So everything now is lined up. So I'm going to be CAing these two formers, and then once that's done, I will pull in this bottom using this centre line, and we've got these little fillets that I made here which will just pinch in to give a little bit more strength. Once that's done, I will probably then think about doing these cross pieces here and leave this front right until the very end. So we'll get the strength in this bit of the fuselage first so that it's not going to twist. I may even put a little bit of a balsa in the bottom here, just going across, just a piece of 1/8 like that, just to strengthen this here and give it some sort of torsional resistance so it doesn't sort of move like that. And also it probably wouldn't hurt there because this is around the CG. I think the CG is just here, and this is where I'm going to be holding it to launch it. So having a little bit of strength just there would probably be beneficial, but just a really thin piece of 1/8 balsa, maybe a piece about like that. So I will glue this now, and as I say, get these bits in, and we'll get this together. Right, I've now got these cross formers glued in. I've got the tail glued together and pulled with the wedges in, and I'm just making the pieces, the cross pieces, to hold the tail of the fuselage together. And what I'm doing, once I've got one, I'm measuring this from the plan view on the plans. Once I'm happy that that is the right size, I'm making an identical copy. And the copy I'm putting on one side for the top of the fuselage when I turn it over, and the original one I will put in. And that way at least I know that the cross struts that I'm putting in, top and bottom, are the same width. I'm not going to get any variation. Right, well, I've now got this pulled together and it's feeling really quite sturdy. I'm quite pleased with it, and that rear has pulled in lovely and symmetrically. If I've got that lined up with the camera, you can see that, and if I turn it round, we can see it's really taken on quite a nice shape. So I've got all this rear section finished. I've just been outside giving it a sand. We've got the cross formers in. I've even put in F2, which is this front one where I've just pulled that together. It does still need nipping in just a little bit more because we'll need to put in this former. In fact, actually that's more or less right. But I don't want to put that in just yet, because when I come to mount the engine, I'm going to need a little bit of give in the nose cheeks, just to that will go in, but I won't put it in, just to pull those out a little bit to get these in and to get these shaped the right shape. Because as I said earlier, we're going to need to just take a little bit off, if I can line this up, a little bit off on that outside edge, just so it fits in and we don't push these out. I've also got that little piece of 1/8 balsa there, which is where I'm going to grip it, I think, just on the CG, maybe slightly forward of the CG. Now there's only one other job I'm going to do to this today, and that is putting in a piece of sheeting in there, cross grain. Now this wasn't on the plans, these weren't on the plans, but this is a piece that's definitely on the plans. So I've got a really nice light piece of balsa, and I'm just going to put that on, draw the shape of it, cut it out, and then we'll fit that in. And I think then we're going to call this fuselage, call time on this fuselage today. Well, I've now got that piece of balsa in there just to complete kind of the strength, if you like, of this fuselage. And you know what, from the two flat fuselage sides that we started off with today to get into this three-dimensional fuselage. It's really exciting. You know, you can see it starting to take shape, that lovely Quaker design. So anyway, I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and I hope you found it interesting and useful, and please come back and see how we get on in the next video. And in that video we're going to be fitting the engine bearers, getting those shaped and glued in place. We're going to mount the engine, and then we're going to build this nose cowl around the engine and get this front section finished, and that'll really be starting to look good and take shape. So anyway, thanks very much for watching.